Hi everyone, Emily Mercado from Loves to Travel the World Travel Agency. We're going to be spending some time today talking about international travel with kids, because again, that's something that I've been asked a lot about. As travel is opening up, people do want to travel, internationally especially, and they want to include their kids. Parents want to include their children. So we're going to spend some time today talking about how to go about planning and executing an international travel itinerary with children. Okay, so a little bit of an introduction to this traveling. I think can be pretty daunting, even especially if you're going with children. But on a normal day, if you're just traveling either by yourself or with your spouse or significant other, it can be pretty daunting. But again, traveling with children adds a certain level of intensity, so to speak. Especially if you're traveling through time zones and traveling to countries that have a very different cuisines. Especially if you have a picky eater, especially a child who's very picky about what they eat, and also trying to navigate different currencies and different languages. There could be a language barrier where, things aren't always translated properly. So this video, I'm hoping will help you take the stress out of planning and preparing for international travel, especially with children. And it kind of gives you guys and girls a really good idea of what you can expect in terms of international travel with children. Now, these tips and strategies were developed based on personal experience of, my own international travel, both as a child and as an adult, and also through conversations with friends, especially friends who have children. And I hope that you will find these tips for international travel with children to be valuable when you start to plan your next family adventure. So, there's some initial considerations that you want to take into account is that all of these things, traveling through time zones, different foods, different money, vastly different cultures, and even different languages, can be very overwhelming, even for adults. But children, having children, I think for them, it is potentially overwhelming as well. So in order to start off your international trip on the right foot, you want to take these initial things into consideration. The first thing is to consider your destination. All right, you want to consider where it is in the world that you're looking to go. And first, like the first thing in that is that you want to consider if the extra logistics that are needed when traveling internationally are worth it. And what I mean by that is you need to weigh the following. When you travel domestically, say for those of us here in the U.S., when you travel within the United States, you don't need a passport for domestic travel. But for international travel, you do. If you're leaving the country for any reason, then you do need a passport. And also international travel often requires longer flights, say 8 hours or more, especially if you're going, say, from the New York City area to Europe. The average plane ride is 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, depending. And depending on what airline you're using, and also depending on where it is you're going. And I can definitely, speak to Europe as an example. You may need to have a connecting flight or two. And obviously, there's a potential for language barriers and safety considerations to keep in mind. Now, for example, if you're going to a place like the UK, England, Scotland, Ireland, obviously their main language is English, so there's not going to be a language barrier when you go there. But if you go to a country, say, like Finland or Norway or Spain or France, when their first language is not English, there is the very, very high potential for some pretty significant language barriers. Keep in mind, though, that said, keep in mind that especially if you stick to a lot of the major cities, and I'll kind of pick on France for a minute. If you go to major cities like Paris or Marseille in the south, or Cannes or Nice or any of those major cities, there are going to be a lot of people who do speak English, but more often than not, you should know a little bit of French or the main language of wherever it is that you're going. And of course, time zone, differences in time zones and also jet lag can really mess with a child's sleep schedule. And let's get real, an adult sleep schedule as well. Jet lag is tough. But yeah, so these are all things that you need to keep in mind when you're considering international travel. And of course, differences in local transportation and cuisine may not be something that your family can comfortably adjust to, but you can with significant advanced preparation. So a pro tip for this, for me, the extra steps and extended travel times are well worth the experience and enjoyment that comes from traveling to a different country. For me, having been, to many, many different countries throughout my life, my global perspective has definitely changed for the better. And I don't mind spending a little bit extra so that I could have a really good experience. Okay, and again, preparing in advance and traveling with a plan will make absolutely sure that you and your family can rest easy once you arrive at your final destination. And it does take a bit of planning, and I, as your travel agent, can definitely help you guys give some really personal tips and strategies specific to your unique family needs. The second tip is to analyze infant and child airfare and policies. This is super important, guys, because every airline is a little bit different in terms of what they require for infants and children. You can bring infants and children on an airplane, but you just want to check with the airline before you book. To check what their policies are, because there are an extensive number of things that you do need to consider, especially when flying with children, and especially when you're going on an international flight. Some of those initial considerations, obviously need to include differences and considerations related to airfare. All right. For example, with infants, generally, airlines define an infant as a child who is younger than 2 years old. Often airlines do not require a ticket if said infant is seated on a parent or guardian's lap. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not really sure that I would really want my infant or, baby to be sitting on my lap for the duration of an 8-hour flight. But, whatever your preferences are. Now, international flying, there is the possibility that an infant cost might be 10% of an adult fare. So, for example, plus taxes and fees, of course. So before taxes and fees, say if your ticket is $100, then certain airlines might require you to pay $10, 10% of your ticket. Now, they're going to obviously add taxes and fees on that, even if the infant will be held in your lap. So sometimes it might be better to purchase a seat for your infant just out of comfort's sake. But again, it is up to your personal preference. And you want to contact your airline directly to ask them things like how old does a baby have to be to fly with your airline? Some airlines will permit as early as 2 days old. I personally would not recommend that. Just because the infant is so little and so new, um, where other airlines require newborns to be at least 14 days old. And you also want to ask said airline what documentation is required. Some airlines require a doctor's note, depending on the age of the baby, on the day that they're going to be flying. And then obviously you also want to check which baby equipment can you check in, which can you carry on, and do these policies vary if the infant has a ticket or not? And also, are airfare discounts offered to infants traveling in an FAA-approved child restraint? So these are all things that you want to consider with an infant. My personal preference is that that you wait until at least your child is 2 years old. But again, I'm not going to deny anything. That's just my own personal preference. And some airlines, it is important to note that some airlines do offer complimentary bassinets or sky cots for use on international flights with an infant under 6 months of age. So these are all things that you need to consider, especially when traveling internationally with infants. Now, children is a little bit children are a little bit different. Airlines define children as passengers between the ages of 2 and 12 years old. In this case, they do require their own airline ticket and passport. I cannot stress the importance of having a passport for your child. Now, it is good that some airlines will provide discounted fares for children flying internationally, but those discounts do vary from airline to airline, and they're not offered on all flights. And child fare discounts are also not typically advertised online, so you do need to call the airline directly. And this is where someone like me, someone like a travel agent, can step in on your behalf. I can make all of those phone calls for you, and I can make all of those arrangements for you as well, provided that I have all of the correct information about your child when I call the airline. Typically, you would need to contact the airline directly to ask about these following things. Are there any current discounts for children? Is extra documentation other than a passport needed, like an extra documentation meaning a birth certificate or any other form of identification? What are the baggage allowances for children traveling internationally on a discount fare? Some airlines may charge an extra fee because they're not making as much money on a normal airfare, where they may have an additional charge for that particular child's baggage. And what are the airline's child safety seat guidelines? Some airlines do require a safety seat or a booster seat for your child. Okay. Number 3 tip is research required immunizations. Not every country is going to require extra immunizations, but as always, you do want to do your due diligence. And again, as your travel agent, I can help you figure that out. The possibility does exist that you and your kids will need additional vaccinations depending on where you go, especially in places in Africa or the Caribbean or places in Asia. The remote possibility does exist. And different countries do have different health risks and may require specific vaccinations or vaccines. If you're traveling through Europe or Canada or say Central and South America, generally you're not going to need additional vaccines or additional immunizations, but it doesn't hurt to check. And of course, as always, you can to find out which vaccinations your family needs. It is always advisable to check in with your physician or healthcare provider, and also you can check in with me as your travel agent, just to be sure what countries require these vaccinations. You can also visit the CDC's Travelers Health website for recommended and or are required vaccinations. Most of these immunizations, it should be noted, that they should be given at least 1 month prior to international travel, just to allow the vaccine or immunization to take full effect. Therefore, you want to try to schedule a doctor's visit at least 6 to 8 weeks prior to your trip. Just to get a checkup and get those vaccinations. That way, it will allow plenty of time for the vaccinations to take effect, and also if there are additional boosters, it will allow time for those boosters to be administered if necessary. An additional planning tip is to consider getting both required and recommended vaccinations. Obviously, the required vaccinations, there's no way around, like you have to get those. But just the recommended vaccinations, I mean, you could go either way. You don't have to get them, but my recommendation is that you do get anything that's required and recommended. Many travelers, myself included, find that in getting all vaccinations, you're more likely to be traveling with a certain sense of peace of mind, knowing that you're completely covered from anything going wrong. And also, it's very important to take a copy of your children's immunization records when you travel, just in case something does go awry. And like if you're stopped in customs, prior to entering the country, you can say, hey, yes, we have been immunized, and here's the documentation. So traveling internationally with children, and even as an adult, provides a certain unique learning experience when it comes to cultural differences between countries. Traveling abroad does provide many unique developmental and educational benefits, not just for kids, but also for adults. A couple of years ago, I had walked the Camino de Santiago with my dad, and that experience allowed me to really interact with local Spaniards on a level that I would never have gotten to otherwise. And it allowed me to really learn a lot more about the Spanish culture and the Spanish way of life. So in traveling, you can learn, even as an adult, you can and should learn as much as you can. And you can use international travel to teach about cultural differences, and as a parent, I can also help facilitate your research on whatever country or countries you're going to be visiting. I would suggest, prior to your vacation, sitting down as a family and discussing the opportunity that you have to learn about the country that you're going to be visiting, and also its culture. You can discuss things also like the country's language, their economy, any local cuisine, and their overall way of life. Children at times can have a fear of the unknown, and it's my opinion that they will be much more comfortable if they learn about those differences and what they can expect ahead of time. And giving a first-hand perspective of a new country or region will help change their perspective that differences are indeed okay. An additional planning tip, and something that my parents did with me and my brother when I was younger, going to a new country, teach kids how to say hello, goodbye, and thank you in the local language before arriving. And even simple phrases like, I don't speak French, I don't speak German, do you speak English? Or even, where's the bathroom? And that way you can start to build bridges and show the locals that you are indeed making an effort to learn more about their language, and that you're wanting to interact with them on a deeper level. Children will love trying out their new words. They'll practice it, practice those words, practice those phrases, and it will, these phrases will open doors everywhere. And also, purchasing or using a foreign language translator is also a fun way to enhance communication. I personally use Google Translate. It's free. It's a free app, and you can actually, the nice thing with Google Translate is that you can actually type something in, and if you push the little speaker icon, you can the translator will actually say it for you so that you can hear the proper pronunciation. International travel with children, documentation. Sorry guys, I'm just going to turn down my phone because I'm getting some alerts. Traveling with documentation, especially a passport, regardless of your age, is super, super, super important. I can't stress that enough. Proper documentation is absolutely necessary for international travel of any kind, at any age. It's an essential component for safe and legal, I just had to put that in there, safe and legal international travel. And when it comes to international travel documentation, particularly a passport, please be sure to account for the following information. Number one, infant documentation. All children, including infants, must have their own passport or trusted traveler program document for U.S. entry. For an infant, say, that's under 2 years old, or especially a very, very newborn, you just want to check, you just want to make sure to check what those requirements are before traveling. If your destination requires an entry visa, you are going to need one for your infant as well. And make sure that you make an appointment at your nearest passport center for a time when your baby will be calm and alert. See, and this is why I would suggest not traveling with a very new infant, say that's 2 weeks old or younger, because there is a certain amount of turnaround time, especially when getting a passport. Your infant will need to be looking at the camera with their eyes open and not crying in any way during his or her passport photo. Anyway, number 2. Obtain and check passports. Like infants, every traveler ages 2 and up needs to obtain and or have a current passport prior to leaving the country. Okay, and you want to make sure that the passport will still be valid when you're thinking about coming home. Your passport does need to be valid for the duration of your trip. And because there has been an increasingly strong demand for passports in recent years, make sure that you're applying for your family's passports well ahead of your scheduled international travel date. Because you want to make sure that you have your passports in time, and B, if you need expedited processing, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. So you want to make sure that you're avoiding any of those kinds of fees. If you already have your passport, it's a good idea to get one, even if you're not planning on any international travel anytime soon. But if you already have a passport, make sure to review the current entry and exit requirements for your destination. Many countries require U.S. passport holders have their passport be valid for at least 6 months after you return home. I don't know why that is, but it's a good idea to make sure that your passport is valid. And you want to see if you currently have a passport, you want to make sure that your current passport is still valid. Child's passport is valid for 5 years, and an adult passport is valid for 10 years. And you want to make sure, like I said before, you want to make sure that your passport is valid for the duration of your trip. You want to make sure, if you want to review current passport requirements and look at the application process, you can visit the U.S. Department of State Bureau of Consular Affairs website. Okay? It's very important that you check to make sure what all of those processes are, and make sure that you get your passport in time for your travel. An additional planning tip, make and bring a color copy of your passport ID page and keep it in a separate location from your originals in your carry-on luggage. Guys, I can't stress that enough. I cannot stress that enough. I said in another video, I had gone on a cruise in and out of Marseille, France, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago by now. I had gone with my family, and my mother's purse was stolen right out of our car. And of course, in her purse was her passport, her cell phone, her credit cards. So I cannot stress enough, how important it is. Fortunately, my father had made photocopies of not only her passport, but also the front and back of all of her credit cards. So as my parents were going to the U.S. Embassy in Marseille, I got on the phone with the credit card companies to cancel all of her credit cards. So just in case, something like that happens, you have documentation that you do have your credit card, that you do have your passport, and you can be granted from the U.S. Embassy. You can be granted an emergency passport. All right. And again, this will be used to help generate a police report as well. So number 3, the third tip is a permission to travel, a travel consent, and medical authorization forms. Now, this is only really relevant if your child is traveling either by themselves or with a guardian or like a coach, basically someone that is not their parent. Again, this specifically relates to children who want to take an international trip alone, either without adult supervision or with someone other than their parent. And these forms are necessary because of increasing instances of child abduction, especially in custody cases, and a growing number of children who are the victims of trafficking. Additional documentation is required for infants and children traveling internationally without both parents or guardians. And I hate that the world has come to this, but it's very, very important for me to cover this. A child travel consent form, basically, it's a legal document that allows a minor child, a child under the age of 18, to travel without both parents or legal guardians present. This particular form should be used when a child is traveling as an unaccompanied minor, or even with another adult who is not their legal guardian, i.e. a grandparent, a teacher, a coach, or even a friend of the family. Okay. Adults traveling outside of the U.S. with children under the age of 18, other than their own biological children, must have a permission to travel letter from both of the minor's parents or guardians. This particular permission to travel letter must be notarized and obviously written by the parents, and it is required to enter many countries, and sometimes even if they're on a cruise, it's a required piece of documentation that's needed. If a minor child is traveling internationally without a parent or legal guardian, a third document is needed, a child medical consent form. Basically, what this does is that it grants authority for another adult to make medical decisions on their behalf. So those documents are crucial for your children to have if they are traveling with other people, especially internationally. So international travel with kids, the journey to get there. That's kind of the next phase of things. Number 1 tip is to prioritize sleep and food. If you prioritize sleep and food for your children before and during and even after international travel, those are the foundations of their happiness and good health. It's important to set up your child for success by making sure that they are well rested before departure and that you continue to make their sleep a priority during your travels. Now, when it comes to traveling to Europe, especially from, say, the New York City area, my recommendation, and this is specific to Europe, my recommendation is that if you're going, say, to France, picking on France again, if you're traveling to France basically from west to east, you do want to take an overnight flight. That way your child can sleep on the plane and be ready to go when you land. All right. And when you're coming back, say when you're coming from France back to the U.S., it's actually ideal to take a morning flight so that you can then, by the time you get back here to the States, it'll be evening and they'll be more ready to go to bed. So, And you do want to pick and choose your late nights wisely, as kids can become overtired and confused, especially when traveling through time zones. Make sure that your child also has access to foods that keep them satisfied, even if that means bringing foods from home. Like I said, there could be variances between local cuisines, and the foods that your child might like and be familiar with might not be available to them when you go abroad. And when keeping a child well fed, properly hydrated, and well rested, everything else will fall into place. Number 2, prepare for customs. Guys, this is again crucial. You've arrived at your destination with the other hundreds of people on your plane. Okay, at first glance, the line to get through customs is huge. The first thing you want to do is start by taking your child to the bathroom and getting everyone a snack. Okay, if possible. And then give your kids a little bit of extra reassurance, that going through customs is a part of the international travel process. And again, it's how we stay safe. An additional planning tip is that to make sure that you have a pen to fill out any customs paperwork that you're going to be given while you're still on the airplane. You're going to want to fill out both the top and the bottom of the immigration forms. If there are two parents, two adults, have one person manage the children while the other attends to the customs paperwork. It is important to note that customs paperwork is very detail oriented and does require focus especially when you're writing down passport numbers, because they will check. Tip number three, gear up for long haul flights. Now, like I said earlier, especially if you're traveling from the New York City area to Europe in particular, the flight can be anywhere from 6 to 8 hours and even up to 10 hours, depending on where in Europe you're going. The importance of having an iPad or tablet for each child, that can't be overstated. Limiting screen time on an airplane, that just goes out the window. Let long haul flights be the exception to screen time rules, and is probably the best way to keep your children content for the longest periods of time. Make sure to pack each child a pair of child-sized headphones, along with any and all device chargers, because if you have a dead tablet, then chaos likely can and will ensue. I would suggest overpacking versus underpacking on the amount of food and snacks that you bring. Airplane food doesn't usually taste very good, and kids will usually prefer food from home. You can also get food once you get through security. You can also buy foods in the terminal as you're waiting for your plane. But you want to try to bring food from home. And what I would suggest is to pack 24 hours worth of food and snacks in order to account for any travel delays. An additional planning tip, if you're traveling with small children, you may regret not buying an inflatable footrest. An inflatable footrest, the height lines up with the airline seat so that your child can lay flat on the seat, just like this. And don't forget an airplane travel pillow and blankets. The ones provided by the airline are just downright dirty. So you want to make sure that you're bringing your own pillow and blanket. And you want to make sure, just like in this picture, you do want to make sure that your child remains strapped in, even when they're sleeping, just for safety's sake. Tip number 4, have a plan for jet lag. If you have a child that's overly tired, there is the potential to majorly upset a family vacation. If you find that your child is already challenged by transitions, an international trip through multiple time zones can pose an even bigger challenge. Okay, with careful planning, with careful, preparation, you can minimize the effects of jet lag. That will preserve the pleasure that you are expecting to get out of your family vacation. Because international travel is a big investment, both time-wise and money-wise. And for more tips, you can visit the Vacation Critics 12 Tips for Managing Jet Lag with Kids at this website right here. You can pause the screen, you can pause the video, take a screenshot. But these tips are actually great for you, especially if you're traveling with young children and you want to help prepare them for jet lag. Okay, so international travel with kids, the overall experience. Now that you've arrived, you can start focusing on finding ways to make your international trip more about the experience. Okay? I mean, obviously, it's great to see all of the sights, but the experience is what really makes the trip. Again, move slowly around your surroundings, immerse yourself in culturally unique activities and excursions, and please, for the love of God, don't eat McDonald's. Don't eat McDonald's, because we get that plenty. We get like fast food, McDonald's, Burger King, Subway. We get that here. So I would definitely very much encourage you guys to do some research, and I can help you with that too, about finding restaurants that are a little bit off the beaten path, that where locals eat. Because I've often found that the best meals that I have had, especially while traveling internationally, are those meals that I've enjoyed that really aren't touristy. And it really gave me a flavor of what that particular country is all about, especially in terms of cuisine. And also be on the lookout for experiences that will help your family learn and grow during your trip, because you do want to include some sort of educational component as well. And it's a really good opportunity to actually see a place with your own eyes and experience it rather than just reading about it in a book. And of course, make the most of your opportunity to have a truly authentic travel experience. Like I said, there is definitely something about interacting with the local people where they eat, going to their markets, talking to them, learning about what it is that they do. International travel, I cannot overstate the importance of taking international trips. An additional planning tip, if you're not sure exactly what place you want to visit, you can check out this list of the 21 best international family-friendly vacations, especially if you're going to be traveling with grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins. Any of these places that are listed in here, I can help you facilitate any and all of that travel from beginning to end. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you got a lot out of this video. If you have any questions or if you want to leave any feedback, please put any comments down in the comments box. If you want to reach out to book some travel, you can reach me by email. Here's my email, my website, Facebook, Instagram, Yelp, and YouTube for other videos. Thank you so much for watching. And again, I hope you got a lot out of this video. And I'm looking forward to working with you to help make your travel dreams come true. Have a good day.